The bioengineered dragon hatchling designated X7B had been crying for 43 hours straight when Lewis first heard him through the ventilation shaft. Lewis crouched in the narrow maintenance corridor of Sector 7, his father's toolkit forgotten beside him as the sound pierced through the metal grating. It wasn't a roar or a screech. It was unmistakably a sob, broken and desperate, emanating from the xenobiology laboratory 3 floors below. The boy pressed his ear against the cold steel, his breath fogging in the recycled air of the Prometheus station's lower levels. "You're not supposed to be here, Lewis." He spun around to find Anna standing in the corridor, her white research assistant's coat too large for her 17-year-old frame. Her dark eyes reflected the dim emergency lighting, and she carried a data tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. "My dad's fixing the oxygen recyclers in Sector 8, Lewis said, straightening up. He was 15, tall for his age, with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. I was just listening to X7B, Anna finished. She knelt beside him, her expression softening. He hasn't stopped since X7A died during the cellular division phase. Lewis had heard whispers about the Dragon project in the station's mess hall. The Prometheus station orbited Kepler 442b, humanity's first successful exoplanet colonization candidate, and the scientists aboard were tasked with creating organisms capable of surviving the planet's harsh methane atmosphere. Dragons, bioengineered from extremophile DNA, avian genomes, and synthetic proteins, were meant to be humanity's companions in the New World. Intelligent, adaptable, and capable of breathing both oxygen and methane. But nobody had mentioned they could grieve. "Can I see him?" Lewis asked. Anna hesitated, her fingers dancing across the tablet's surface. "Dr. Yamamura would terminate my internship. The Dragon project is classified Level 4. Your father only has clearance for maintenance zones." Another sob echoed through the shaft, rower this time, filled with a loneliness that made Lewis's chest ache. "Please," he said quietly. Anna studied him for a long moment, then sighed. 5 minutes, and if anyone asks, you were never there." The xenobiology lab was a cathedral of glass and steel. Containment pods lined the walls, each housing failed experiments, organisms that couldn't survive the transition between environments, their forms suspended in amber preservation gel. But in the center of the room, beneath a dome of transparent aluminum, lay X7B. He was barely the size of a large dog, his scales shimmering between cobalt blue and deep purple under the UV lamps. His wings, still membranous and translucent, were folded against his sides. But it was his eyes that stopped Lewis in his tracks, golden, slit-pupiled, and drowning in tears that evaporated into steam against his heated body. Beside him, in a smaller pod, floated the perfectly preserved body of X7A, identical in every way, except for the stillness. "The genetic sequencing failed during the twinning process," Anna explained, her voice clinical but her hands trembling slightly. "X7A's neural pathways never fully integrated. He died 3 days after hatching. X7B has been inconsolable." Lewis approached the containment dome slowly. The dragon's head lifted, tracking his movement with predatory precision despite his grief. A low growl rumbled in his chest, warning, not aggression. "Hey," Lewis said softly, pressing his palm against the warm aluminum. "I'm Lewis." X7B's pupils dilated. He tilted his head, the gesture achingly familiar like a confused puppy. Then he opened his mouth, and instead of fire or roar, a single word emerged, garbled, inhuman, but unmistakable. "Brr-rather." Anna gasped. He's not supposed to be verbal yet. The linguistic cortex shouldn't develop for another 6 months. But Lewis barely heard her. He was staring at the dragon, at the desperate hope flickering in those golden eyes, and suddenly understood. X7B wasn't crying for a failed experiment. He was mourning family. "The neural link," Anna breathed, her fingers flying across her tablet. Dragons were engineered with a quantum-entangled consciousness for twin pairs. It was supposed to allow them to coordinate during atmospheric drops to Kepler 442b. X7A and X7B were entangled at the molecular level. When X7A died, X7B didn't just lose a sibling, he lost half of his mind. Lewis's throat tightened. What will happen to him? Dr. Yamamura wants to terminate the project. Without the twin link, X7B is incomplete. He'll never be able to perform the colony missions. Anna's voice cracked. They're going to euthanize him tomorrow. No. The word came out harder than Lewis intended. He looked at the dragon, at the creature who had been engineered into existence only to be destroyed for failing to meet specifications. There has to be another way. There isn't. The quantum entanglement requires. Anna stopped, her eyes widening. Wait. Dr. Chen's research on cross-species neural interfacing. She theorized that any consciousness with sufficient complexity could form quantum bridges if exposed to the right electromagnetic frequencies. Lewis didn't understand half of what she was saying, but he understood the look on her face. You mean a human could potentially fill the void in X7B's consciousness. Not permanently, not like a true twin link, but enough to stabilize him, to give him a reason to keep living. Anna was already pulling up files on her tablet, her hands shaking with either excitement or terror. It's never been tested. It could fry your neural pathways. It could do nothing. Or it could save him, Lewis finished. They stared at each other across the lab, the weight of the decision hanging between them like gravity. I'll do it, Lewis said. The neural interfacing equipment was buried in Storage Bay 12, collecting dust among abandoned projects. Anna worked with frantic precision, her intern's clearance barely sufficient to access the materials. Lewis watched her assemble the apparatus, a crown of fiber-optic cables and electromagnetic field generators that looked more like medieval torture device than cutting-edge technology. This was designed for dolphin communication experiments, Anna explained as she calibrated the frequencies. The theory is that consciousness exists as quantum information patterns. If we can synchronize your brain waves with X7Bs, the quantum foam that underlies reality might establish a bridge. In English, Lewis asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You're going to think together. Anna met his eyes. Are you sure about this? Once the link forms, it might be permanent. You could spend the rest of your life hearing his thoughts, feeling his emotions. Lewis thought about the dragon's golden eyes, drowning in grief. He thought about his own father, who had worked himself nearly to death after Lewis's mother had died during the station's construction phase. He understood loss. He understood loneliness. I'm sure. They returned to the xenobiology lab at 300 hours, when the station's crew was at its smallest. Anna had forged Dr. Yamamura's digital signature to access the containment protocols. Her hands trembled as she opened X7B's dome. The dragon lifted his head, steam rising from his nostrils. Up close, Lewis could see the intricate patterns of his scales, the way bioluminescent markings pulsed along his spine in time with his heartbeat. X7B was beautiful and terrifying and utterly alone. Hey, buddy, Lewis whispered, kneeling beside him. I'm going to try something. I don't know if it'll work, but... X7B pressed his forehead against Lewis's chest, and the boy felt the dragon's heart hammering against his ribcage. Another sob shuddered through the creature's body. Anna placed the neural crown on Lewis's head, then attached corresponding sensors to X7B's skull, his neck, the base of his tail, all the major neural centers. On 3, she said, her voice tight. 1, 2. The world exploded into sensation. Lewis felt his consciousness expand outward like a supernova, touching something vast and alien and desperately wounded. He felt X7B's grief as a physical thing, a black hole tearing at the edges of identity. He felt the ghost pain of the severed twin link, a phantom limb of the soul that would never stop aching. But he also felt wonder, He felt the dragon's first breath, the moment of hatching into consciousness. He felt the warmth of X7A's presence before it vanished, the brief, perfect wholeness of being two who were one. And he felt beneath it all, a desperate, fragile hope. Brother, the thought wasn't in words but in pure meaning, cascading through their shared neural space. I'm here, Lewis thought back. I'm not your twin. I'm not what you lost, but I'm here. The quantum bridge stabilized, not perfect, not complete, but present. Like a rope thrown across a chasm, like a hand reaching through darkness. X7B's sobbing stopped. The dragon pulled back slightly, his golden eyes meeting Lewis's brown ones. A purr rumbled in his chest, and his tail, covered in sharp metallic scales, wrapped gently around Lewis's wrist. Brother, X7B thought again, and this time it wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a choice. Lewis felt tears streaming down his own face. Yeah, he whispered aloud. Yeah, I'll be your brother. Anna was crying too, her data tablet forgotten as she watched the impossible connection form before her eyes. The quantum readings are stable, she managed. You did it. You actually did it. But they all knew the real challenge was just beginning. Dr. Yamamura arrived at 6:30 hours to find his prized xenobiological specimen awake, alert, and psychically bonded to a janitor's son. The scientist was a small man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He stood in the laboratory doorway, taking in the scene, Anna with her intern badge hanging crooked, Lewis with the neural crown still tangled in his hair, and X7B pressed against the boy's side, wings half spread in a protective gesture. Explain, Dr. Yamamura said quietly. Anna stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. X7B was dying from neural collapse due to the severed twin link. Lewis volunteered for cross-species consciousness bridging using Dr. Chen's theoretical framework. The quantum entanglement has stabilized. X7B is functional. Functional, Dr. Yamamura repeated. He approached slowly, scanning X7B with a handheld medical tricorder. The dragon growled, but Lewis placed a hand on his neck, and X7B settled. The doctor studied his readings for a long moment. The neural integration is remarkable, more complete than even a twin link in some respects. He looked at Lewis. You understand what you've done. This creature is designed to survive on Kepler 442b. When the colony ships launch in 3 years, X7B will be transported to the surface. If you remain bonded, separation could kill you both. Lewis felt X7B's fear spike through their connection, felt the dragon's desperate need for attachment warring, with the understanding of what that meant for the human boy beside him. Then I guess I'm going to Kepler 442b, Lewis said. His father would be furious. The colony selection process was rigorous, and at 15, Lewis had no specialized skills beyond basic station maintenance. But looking into X7B's eyes, feeling the fragile bridge of consciousness they'd built together, Lewis knew there was no other choice. Dr. Yamamura's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The Dragon Project was designed to create companions for humanity's next great leap into the stars. Perhaps we were too focused on the engineering and forgot the companionship part. He turned to Anna. Write this up, every detail. If this bond holds, it could change everything about how we approach the colonization missions. Anna's eyes went wide. Sir, I violated at least a dozen protocols. And you may have saved this project, Dr. Yamamura interrupted. Lewis, you'll need to undergo full neural compatibility testing. Anna, you're promoted to research associate, effective immediately. You'll be documenting this bond for the next 3 years. As the doctor left to file his reports, Lewis and Anna exchanged stunned glances. X7B, sensing his brother's confusion through their link, chirped, a sound of pure curiosity. We're going to the stars, Lewis whispered to the dragon, scratching beneath his jaw where the scales were softest. You and me, buddy. Together, X7B thought. the concept carrying undertones of permanence, of choice, of family rebuilt from the ashes of loss. The boy and the dragon sat in the quiet lab as the station's artificial dawn began to cycle through the viewports, painting them both in shades of gold and blue. Outside, Kepler 442b hung in the darkness, a world of methane storms and alien chemistry, waiting for its first explorers. Lewis felt X7b's excitement through their bond, felt the dragon's anticipation mixing with his own nervousness. They had been engineered for this, X7b by science and Lewis by choice. Two beings who had found each other in grief and forged something new from their shared loneliness. 3 years later, when the colony ship Prometheus II descended through Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere, a dragon and a human boy would be the first to set foot on humanity's new home. They would breathe the alien air together, explore the strange landscape together, and build a future together. But that was still to come. For now, in the quiet of the xenobiology lab, a dragon who had wept for his lost twin finally slept peacefully, his head resting in his new brother's lap, both of them whole.